Thank you so much, Glendyn, for talking with Popcorn Podcast. It's really nice to chat to you. And congratulations on getting Penguin Bloom out into the world. It must feel great, really satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange time to be releasing films or to be in the cinema, but it feels like the right time.
Yes.
You know, Penguin Bloom, if you just look at the story, it's about a woman who cuts herself off really from the world. She self-isolates in a way, and yet comes out the other side in the same but different. And I sort of feel like there's almost feels a bit like a metaphor for a lot of the lives that we've been living now. Like we've all been locked inside, and now there's an opportunity for us to get out there and see things. And I'm sure a lot of us we're different, but we're still the same. So hopefully there's something in that.
Now, they say you should never work with animals and children, and you've gone off the deep end here and done both. What was it like to wrangle boys and birds on set every day? What was a typical day on set looking like for you?
Well, I'll say that in some ways, Penguin was easier to wrangle than the three boys. I'd always joke. So, like, if you've got Penguin and three boys in a scene, you may as well have four penguins. They're as hard as each other to wrangle. But I don't know. I kind of like the spontaneity and the randomness that kids and animals bring. You can control them in some ways, but really what they're doing is really what they're going to do. And I love embracing that. And I guess it brings a certain wildness to the performance and to the set, which you can't fight that. You have to go with it. I love it.
Now, animals are obviously great for healing. There's scientific studies that have proven that, but you wouldn't think a magpie would connect so strongly. How did you get the audience to really bond and connect with or feel that bond on screen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I spent a lot of time in my pre-production just looking at birds, looking at all kinds of birds, but definitely going to the park and just watching magpies. And they're different to most, like dogs and cats. They show affection differently. They've got friendlier faces, where magpies, and a lot of people don't like magpies. They've sort of got this mask. It's a beak and black eyes, and so I guess we used a bunch of different techniques, like but performance as well. Like we were able to get beautiful performances from this bird, but we sampled their voice and used it slightly differently, but always trying to keep it as wild as possible. Like Penguin was never a pet. Penguin was a wild bird that was free to come and go. But I think it's interesting that with animals on screen in particular, even though they can't speak, the audience is really willing to put words into the animals' heads and what they might be thinking. So I guess to answer your question, I would just try and create scenarios where the audience would know what the animal was thinking, what the bird was thinking, if that makes sense, what we want them to be thinking.
You used mostly real birds for this, didn't you? So was there animatronics used at all? I'm thinking of the scene where the other magpies get a bit territorial with Penguin. Yeah. How did you pull that off?
Well, we had 13 different magpies to play Penguin. Wow. We had a robot bird, like an animatronic bird. We had a puppet, and there's a bit of CGI in there as well. And I don't like saying which bits were which, because to me it's just all Penguin.
Yeah. Okay.
But we had set ourselves out for doing a lot more, say, animatronic or a lot more CGI work. But we were all amazed at what we were getting in camera. Like the birds were, gave us a lot more than what we ever expected. I guess we went into it thinking the worst, but we probably 95% of what you see is real. It's pretty amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's such a personal story. What was it that jumped out at you or that connected you immediately into this story?
Well, when I was first sent the book quite a few years ago, I was just taken by how simple and how beautiful that story was. And I'd never had a pet magpie, and I don't have a spinal injury, and yet I really connected with the story. So I knew that there was something universal there that we'd all appreciate. I think the power of this story, and I guess this is why Sam Bloom's story has sort of gone out into the world, is that I don't necessarily think it's someone that's had a spinal injury and they meet a bird. I think it's someone who, you know, may not have had a spinal injury, may have had a depression, or may have lost a loved one, or may have had their heart broken, or may have had an addiction or something. They've had something that they haven't been able to see through. They can't see through it. And yet it's the most random and unexpected thing that gets them out of that. So whether it may not be a bird, it could be something else, but it happens. And I guess it's, you know, for me, the film is about generosity and allowing yourself to care for something else. And I think that's the big thing. I think that's what animals do for us, that, you know, there's the spirit of generosity, as I call it, that you have to look after an animal, you have to care for it, you have to feed it. Or even if you're watching animals in the wild, they've got their own lives and they do their own thing and they don't really care about themselves. They're just getting on with things. And I think there's something about that we as human beings connect with.
Did you ever feel the weight being caretaker for a family story? Because it's not just Sam's, obviously. It's, you know, it's not just her journey to healing, it's the whole family's.
Yeah. I mean, I've often thought about this through the whole process, just how invasive, you know, this story is in a way. Like, and Cam and Sam and the whole family are totally open to it. But it's not just Sam Bloom's story. It's Sam and Cam and their 3 children. And we shot it in their house. So you couldn't sort of get more evasive in some ways. But I've always been very conscious of that. I was always conscious that we were telling a real story about real people that are alive and living and you know, continue to live with a lot of pain. And you know, Sam Bloom's injury is still there. Like, she's got a spinal injury that, you know, she has to live with. So there was always a constant reminder, I guess, that what we're doing is real, and it was my job to sort of honor that story and do it in the most authentic and honest way that I could.
Now, Sam's injury is obviously very horrific. How did you decide how much of that to show and how to portray it in the film?
Yeah, like the Blooms really wanted us to show a lot more, and you know, we could have gone down certain paths to show a lot more, you know, a lot more gory detail, if you like. But I was really keen to make a film, and this is even really about the rating. Like, you know, I wanted to make a PG film, but I wanted to make a film that isn't necessarily a family film, but it's a film you can take your family to. And there's a level that I know that people can handle. And I wanted to show, I guess, without getting graphic or, you know, getting too involved in the injury, I guess I wanted to show exactly what it's like to have that injury, but without getting too caught up in I guess the other detail that would turn it into a different film and maybe not make it as accessible as we wanted to make it. But I guess what it is, and you know, Sam was very adamant in having this. It doesn't shy away from the realities. Like, I think you get a sense of what it would be like to have an injury like that, not so much physically, but how it affects your family life and your social life and the extended, you know, friends and family, and that, you know, it affects every aspect of your life.
It seems like they were very involved. The Blooms were very involved in the production. Did that help, having them around on set?
I like having people around. That wasn't an issue for me. Some of the actors felt like that they needed to be by themselves, didn't want them watching when they were acting. And but Naomi was very happy to have Sam around, as well as other members of the family. So it helps and hinders in different ways. Like, you kind of want them close, but at arm's length. Right. I think, you know, particularly when you're shooting, when in pre-production, you know, you're trying to gain as much knowledge and information as you can. But once you're shooting, you know, you kind of the story, you know, the film takes on its own personality and its own atmosphere, and you're not making a documentary, but you kind of want guidance. Like, you don't want to drift too far away from the story, but you need to have the ability to embellish and I guess dramatize things that, you know, we think are important, but maybe the Blooms didn't. But it's always finding that the balance. It's the balancing act there of trying to find that balance. Yeah.
Now, I know colour was very important to you in visually telling this story. Can you expand a little bit on why yellow was so important?
I've had this story asked before, and I don't have an answer for it. I don't know where the yellow thing came from.
It's in the notes.
I know. but definitely, like as far as, even though we shot in their house, like we reskinned the interior. We kind of controlled that environment as much as we could.
Yeah, you became a home makeover specialist, it seems.
Yeah. For lots of reasons, but more so because the majority of the film happens inside. And unless you've got their house is amazing the way it is, but visually on camera, I wanted every corner of that house to have detail and texture. So there was a very controlled palette in how we I guess we designed the whole house and the whole film, down to the wood grain and the reduced palette. There's very little black and white because that was all Penguin's world. She was black and white. But no, overall it was a very for what I'm very interested in naturalism and embracing what is actually there, almost from a documentary point of view. But this film is probably the most stylized, if you like, even though it doesn't look like it. There was a lot of control in making it look the way it does. You know the answer to that yellow question? Like, are you expecting me to say something?
Because I was just generally curious because I thought, oh, yellow, because it's not an entirely happy story. It's an uplifting one eventually, but I thought, oh, why yellow? I would have thought
no, I don't.
Muted tones.
I thought maybe I've said something or the answer, and if you said it, I go, oh, right, I know the answer to that. I'm sorry about that.
I was genuinely curious. What qualities of the Blooms did you need Naomi and Andrew particularly to bring out? Incredible actors, Naomi Watts and Andrew Lincoln. But what did you need them to sort of encompass, particularly about Cam and Sam?
So I guess with Cam, the thing that I wasn't aware of, although I kind of was aware. Like I grew up with my grandmother living in their house, and she was in a wheelchair for most of her life. And my mum was a full-time carer, and that's a pretty selfless role. And I've always been interested in those sort of carer characters, I think, because my mum was one of them. Mm-hmm. So Cam, and no one really talks about this. He doesn't really present himself this way, but he's a full-time carer and incredibly generous with his time in what he has to do for Sam day in and day out. And I guess it's something that we were looking at in the making of the film. Like, if a couple in that sort of relationship have an argument, they can't walk to different sides of the house or leave the house and not come back for it. Like, they need each other. Like, Cam needs to care for Sam Bloom all day, every day, like just to doing, for doing the most simplest things. So Andrew Lincoln we got really into that, and knowing that he is a carer and he's almost like, I wouldn't say a life support, but that's sort of the role that he takes on. Mm-hmm. So no matter how frustrated or how irritated you might get with someone, you still have to turn up and help them get in and out of bed, or you have to take them to the bathroom or help them to shower and help them get dressed. And that's a totally different relationship to what most people have. And with Sam, there was obviously a lot of physical things that we wanted to get right, like how do you transfer in and out of bed. Sam Bloom's injury, like anyone with a spinal injury, it's very specific to them. Like, she's injured sort of from, as we say in the film, from the bra strap down. Mm-hmm. So she can only hold herself in certain ways. She can only do certain things. So there was a physical thing that Sam Bloom and Naomi Watts worked on. And then I guess for both of them, there was the psychological aspect of that. And there was, one of the generous things that we got in the process was that Sam Bloom has kept a very detailed diary that no one's ever really seen. It's just hers. And I got a hold of that and sort of created like a Reader's Digest version of that and shared that with Naomi and with the crew as well, like within the heads of department. So we all got a real sense of what really goes on inside the head of someone that's in that situation. And that was probably the most revealing aspect of the collaboration between us, like getting access to that document. It affected everyone. It really helped us focus on exactly what we were doing, and I guess the dimension and what dimension we could bring to that character. It's just not a physical entrapment; it's a psychological one as well. Yeah.
And then you've got the 3 boys as well. That must have been quite a puzzle to get the 3 boys together.
Yeah, I always joke with the Blooms and say, I wish you had one child. Because we've only had to cast one, but they've got 3 amazing kids. They're all incredibly talented and adapted to this terrible thing that happened in their life. But we found 3 boys all really different. Like, I guess what I wanted to do with those boys was to find like a little band of their own, like they're a band of brothers, literally. And we originally started by looking for kids in and around the northern beaches and kids who surfed. And I ended up with this, one kid Abe is from the inner west of Sydney, Griffin's from inner city Melbourne, and Felix lives in country Victoria. But it was about, I guess, trying to get the chemistry right with those guys. So, you could just put them in a scene and let them go, and they just bounce off each other. It was really amazing putting that team together.
It was certainly chaos. I have to say, my heart was in my stomach every time they were jumping off the roof or tying their shoelaces to skateboards. I thought, oh my goodness, no, this is going to end badly.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing, that and like the Bloom family is like this. That even though, Sam Bloom, their mum, had this terrible accident by falling off a rooftop, they jump off the roof. They're surfers, they're skateboarders, they're kind of thrill seekers in a way. And it's amazing to watch Sam just sort of partake in all of that. Like, she sits and watches the kids do the most crazy things. And, Ollie Bloom's an incredible, very competitive freestyle scooter rider, I should say. And even seeing what he does and seeing Sam participate in that, like it's amazing how she's just embraced the physicalness of those 3 boys, even though she's restricted in how she can do that.
Now, the cinema industry is working towards a new normal here. We're very lucky in Australia in some ways. What would you say to people who are maybe still a bit hesitant to get back into the cinema?
Well, I totally understand that hesitation. But I went and did a tech check for the film this morning in a really beautiful big cinema that Roadshow's showing the film out in Pentridge in Brunswick, near where I live, and they said they've had a lot of people coming in and that the audiences have been coming in. So I think people, we know that if we're sensible and we follow the guidelines, and there's a lot of guidelines in cinemas, that you probably, more likely it's going to be okay. And people want to be out in cinemas. I think they're desperate to be out in cinemas. We've been in our homes for too long. So I'm hoping this is a really great excuse, not only for adults to go, but this is a film you can take your family to. So everyone should be getting in there.
And any movies besides your own that you're looking forward to seeing this year and on the big screen?
Ooh, my good friend Greg Fraser shot Dune. I'm very keen to see that. I'm trying to think what else I know is coming out. I've seen The Dry, which is amazing. I'm very happy
fantastic.
That's done well. I'm trying to think what else is coming out. I know that there's been so many things sort of held back. But yeah, Dune's definitely one that I'm looking forward to on the big screen.
Yeah, great. I think that's everything. So thank you so much for your time today, Glendyn. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you so much for your time.